Days 137 and 138. Fascism. A very dark chapter of world history. So let's get started. What is fascism? And here's the technical egghead definition. Dictatorial movement. Any movement, ideology, or attitude that favors dictatorial government, centralized control of private enterprise, repression of all opposition, and extreme nationalism. Now, you may or may not understand that definition. Let me try to simplify it for you. Obey. You're listening to me. That's it. No discussion. You will follow. So number one, absolute loyalty to the state and or leader. And in class, when we read Mussolini's fascist decalogue, he repeated himself. Mussolini is always right. Mussolini is always right. You must follow the leader at great personal risk if you don't. You must obey. Number two, military. When you are spending money on military and your emphasis is on military, and that's just about it, and you forget the other aspects of the society, that's a sign of fascism. And number three, all the goals go to expanding and strengthening the state, regardless if it helps the people. It's not about the people, it's about the state. And that's fascism. And it's a very, very destructive philosophy, and it's proven to be very destructive. So here's a question. Why would anybody in their right mind want to adopt fascism? And let me keep it real simple for you. It brings order to desperate circumstances. You're not going to have fascism in good times. Now, if you've ever been in real commotion, real chaos, you want somebody to take over and say this is how it's going to be. If there is a, heavens forbid, there's a fire in the hallway, I think you're going to want me to be a fascist. You're not going to want me to say, okay, kids, what do you think? Let's form a committee and discuss this. What should we do at this point? You want me to take control. You, out that window. You, go right. Now, boom. And in times of crisis, you want somebody to say, this is how it's going to be. So if you think about the origins of fascism, there were situations where there was economic desperation, there was post-war desperation, there was being mistreated by others in the past desperation. So fascism is born out of desperate, unpleasant circumstances, and it brings order and structure to those circumstances. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at 7 of the fascists of the 20th century, 7 of the most rotten, evil, destructive human beings to have ever walked this earth. So let's be creative about that. So I have some pictures from the past of how some people have created cards. Now, this set right here, straight up pencil and paper. Can't get any more old school or basic, but that works. This one here, super creative, very cool kid, made these cards and went to an artistic level with those. Hey, if that's your Ben, awesome. This here is a combination of old school with a computer. So somebody wrote the information in pen, but printed off a picture. Now these three, are straight up computer. This is from a Topps baseball card app. This is from a Pokemon card app. And this set here, they had the, the printout of the flag and of the individual. In the back of the card, great name for the set of cards, the Fascist and the Furious. That's clever. And they have all the information. So ask yourself what you're good at. Are you artistic? Are you good with computers? But the point of having a card is you're not going to write the Great Gatsby on these. You're going to cut right to the chase of who these 7 people were. And using this analogy of a card, now here is a baseball card. And any baseball card, you'll have a picture of the individual. You'll have their name, and they'll have the information of the team they played for, position, and then some key statistics on the back. Now, we're not going to have baseball stats. So for country, instead of Cleveland Browns, it could be Russia. Time period where they ruled a nation. So not when you're playing ball, when you're running the country. Role they played. This man was an outfielder. This person might be the, prime minister, for instance. Major events during their tenure. So, you're going to talk about the big stuff for a baseball player. They won a championship, or they were the first round pick, or they were an all-star. You're not going to talk about the day-to-day minutia. You're going to talk about the big stuff, just like your people. And a quote that sums up the man. find a quote that really summarizes what this fascist leader was all about. And I think for statistics, we have to talk about the casualties responsible for by these people. It's hard to even wrap your mind around how many human beings suffered and died at the hands of these 7 people. So instead of, batting average or ERA, we're going to talk about casualties. And so that's what I'm looking for in your cards. Here are the 7 fascists. Joseph Stalin from Russia led a very long time. Absolutely brutal. The people, starvations and people getting shipped off to gulags and secret police and just the most underhanded, cruel tactics you've ever read about in your life. So I want you to investigate Stalin from Russia. Benito Mussolini started off as a journalist, and then he took over Italy as a fascist. Maybe not as destructive as the rest of them, but in terms of a fascist ideology and a fascist philosophy, he's your poster child. I mean, this is fascism in a nutshell. So what did Mussolini do? And he was killed by his own people. That gives you a clue. He deserved it, by the way, I would argue. Hitler, this is the face of evil, pure evil, the architect of a genocide that is impossible to wrap your mind around. And Hitler's probably the most well-known of the 7 fascists. I don't know why, but it is from the people. But what did he do? How destructive was he? How did he rise to power? So I want you to find out how Hitler came to be. And I'll give you a little clue here. After the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was set back so far. You can make an argument. If the Treaty of Versailles was handled better, with more thought to the future, Hitler and the Nazi regime possibly might not have risen. And then Francisco Franco. Now, if Hitler's the most well-known from talking to you, Franco is the least well-known. And we're going to talk about him in the construct of the Spanish Civil War. And he had a very long reign. All the way when I was an infant, he was still around. So he had a very long reign. And you can learn about him, but you'll be typing in Spanish Civil War when you're looking up Franco. Tojo, Hideki Tojo from Japan, another fascist. And when we think of Japan during this time period, obviously we think of World War II and the Pacific Theater and island hopping and Pearl Harbor and Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the like. So what did Tojo do? How destructive was he? Is he a pure fascist? Is he a fascist compared to the others? Obviously, the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, Japan, all fascists. So investigate Tojo. Mao Zedong, he's probably, it depends on the statistic you look at, the most destructive fascist leader. And it's hard to even quantify the deaths that these people have. And it's even harder to get accurate numbers. If you were to scour Google, you're going to get different numbers. But all historians can agree Mao Zedong was immensely destructive. And his communist regime to construct it took an enormous human toll. It's hard to even wrap your mind around it. And the last of the 7 fascist leaders, like Franco, not a lot of people have heard of him except from the song Holiday in Cambodia. Don't know how you still know that song, but people know that song. Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. So when you're looking up Pol Pot, you're probably going to be looking up Khmer Rouge, Khmer Rouge, Khmer Rouge. And 2 million people died from his wickedness and cruelty. So I want you to investigate these biographies, and I want to end on a very dark and somber note, that democide, and this is from University of Hawaii, the murder of any person by a government, including genocide, politicized, or mass murder. Now, according to University of Hawaii professor, said that there was 133 million deaths pre-20th century and 262 million deaths in the 20th century. So think about that. The 20th century was the bloodiest century by a mile. And these 7 fascist leaders were part of it. So the reason I teach you this is, it's part of the story. But number 2, if you see regimes anywhere in the world, whether it's at home or anywhere else, and you're seeing those big 3 criterion, if we go back to the beginning here, where there's this insistence on absolute loyalty to the state, and people try to stifle free speech and free expression and individuality, you got to have a red flag go up. When you're seeing the military be the be-all, end-all at the expense of humanitarian efforts, that's a red flag, heads up. And if you hear a country only talking about the state, and neglecting the people, this is the opposite of popular sovereignty. This is the opposite of the Bill of Rights that I taught you. Red flag, heads up. This is a problem. So look forward to seeing your finished projects, and thank you for watching.